I spent a lot of years telling people how to write proposals and how to successfully compete in the grant-making sphere. But one of the things I did not do, because I never really saw the necessity until recently, is to tell people that the process does not begin with writing. The process begins with asking yourself, is it feasible to pursue this? Does it make sense to do so? Listen, your ideas may be brilliant ones. That does not make them fundable ones. Your ideas may have great potential for impacting your community. It doesn't mean that there are foundations lining up to give you money to do it, right? So it always then has to begin by asking yourself a question, and that question is, do we proceed with this? Do we do it? And so last spring I introduced the midterm assignment was to write a feasibility study. And I've done a couple things here. I've condensed that into a shortened version, but I've also included in your packet 2 sample sheets you can use to do a quick on-the-fly feasibility study. All right? Now, you don't have the time to spend days and hours researching this, so I've given you a check sheet, which we created, and you can use that to sort of determine if, in fact, you should proceed and apply for a grant once you decide that you want to proceed in this. So let's start with how you conduct the feasibility study. All right? Number one, you have to begin to ask yourself, is there a fundamental alignment between what I want to do and what grantors are interested in funding? Over the years, people would meet me because I sat in the Keller, and still do, on the Keller Canyon Mitigation Rank and Review Committee. People would meet me, and the conversation would go something like this. Hey, David. I say, I got an idea for you. Fire away. Basketball. And I say, okay, that's a nice idea. Yeah, basketball, it's a game. Yeah, I get it. Youth. I said, okay, I suppose that helps too. After school. And I'm thinking, wow, this is really getting genius now. All right? And this goes on for a while. And in that person's mind is always the idea that they have come up with something creatively genius. And in the back of my head, I'm thinking, do you have any idea how many sports-related after-school programs we have funded? Do you have any idea how many actually have an idea for an after-school basketball program? There's nothing novel about it. There's nothing new about it. And the question is, what different does yours offer? That's the key thing, right? On the bottom of this slide, I put a caption there that says, a good idea isn't always a fundable one. And so that feasibility study is going to help you to sort of differentiate. So what is it? Right? The feasibility study is just a short, kind of structured evaluation of what you want to do, taken in the context of what is available out there. So number one, a feasibility study will help you determine if what you want to do is necessary. People want to get grant money to do programs for multiple reasons. And it isn't always because they've determined there's a community need. There are people who want to do programs in their community to boost their egos. Now, we're going to talk candidly. Is that all right? Yes. There are people who want to do these things in the community to boost their egos. Or they may be retired, they're bored, they've given up on watching all the sports channels that they've got, right, via Xfinity or AT&T or whomever. And so they're looking for something to do because they want to remain relevant. There's absolutely nothing wrong with wanting to remain relevant, right? And the older you get, the more you begin to question, how do I remain relevant? All right? And I'm old enough to make that claim. Right? So there is that. But then more than just determining if the project is necessary, what a feasibility study does, it questions your ability to carry out what you want to carry out. There are people who can come up with brilliant ideas. Implementing is a different thing, right? Everybody is not a good implementer. They're creative geniuses who cannot follow through to implementation. So yes, you're looking first to determine, one, is it necessary? By that, does the community need what you're proposing to provide? And is your organization or you capable of carrying it out? And then next, The purpose of the feasibility study is to assess if there is adequate support out there for what you want to do, and then look at how sustainable it is going to be. So what I've done in the next few slides is giving you the key elements of a feasibility study, and you will find much of this on your paper as well. It begins with a needs assessment. Now, a needs assessment is really not as simple as it sounds, but not as complicated as you might think. Right? When we talk about a needs assessment, you know, I can, you know, if I've had years of doing something and I think, well, what I have to offer is needed by the community, I have to have data to demonstrate that need. Right? I have to have data to demonstrate that need. It also involves evaluating your organization's readiness, and then the next part is really important, stakeholder support. The best grant proposals are those that take on a collaborative approach. In a given year, for the Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund, I read an average of about 120 proposals. That's a lot, right? And in the academic programs aside, I probably read an additional 30 proposals every year. Over the years, I've read hundreds, now into the thousands of proposals. I've read proposals on behalf of HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, Region 9. I've read proposals on behalf of the New York State Department of Health. And I've written a lot of proposals in my time, a whole lot, right? Just that many years ago, I got to the point where I started telling some of the people who were trying to hire me to write proposals, look, your money will get a lot faster, further, if you let me teach you how to do it rather than paying me to do it for you. Right? That's the business of education and learning. But one of the things you have to do is to determine, as you look at all of the other participants in the space, are the other stakeholders supporting what you want to do? If you want to do youth services in Bay Point, have you looked at a potential partnership with Ambrose Park and Recreation District? All right. If you want to do senior services in the city of Hercules, have you looked at the city's own plan? Have you looked at nonprofits out there who are already in that space? And more importantly, have you reached out to the senior centers? Do you have stakeholder support? There's nothing worse for a grantor agency than to put $100,000 into something only to find out that the community does not feel that it's a part of them and they're a part of it. So we look at the funding landscape, and then, of course, we look at sustainability potential. Let's talk a bit about this internal readiness component. I think this is important because this is the hardest thing to do, to evaluate yourself. Self-evaluation doesn't come easy for some people. I'll change that. It doesn't come easy for most of us, right? You know, I remember years ago, my son, who's an adult now, a U.S. Marine veteran, he's going to be 29 later on this month. He was in high school at the time, and he approached me and he said, "Dad, what's an APA Nazi?" I was absolutely stumped. I said, "Oh, what?" He said, "What's an APA Nazi?" I said, well, I know what a Nazi is. And in my world, I know what APA is. APA is the American Psychological Association, and it is generally the standard format that is used in the social sciences and behavioral sciences for academic writing. I said, "I'm not sure how the two come together, though." And he said, "Well, I was on the web the other day, and I stumbled onto this site called Rate Your Professor. And I was reading what a student wrote about you, and they said you were an APA Nazi." And he says, "I want to know what an APA Nazi is." And I had but he was serious. He was in high school, right? And he's trying to defend his dad, and somebody's calling an APA Nazi. And so when I said what a Nazi is, he's like, "Really? What do they mean?" And I explained it, yeah. So what it was is that there were some students who said, "Well, you're just too focused on those requirements." He's driven to, we have to do this. And I don't see the real life use for it, right? At first, I used to say, I am what I am, they're going to have to live with it. But then I started growing a bit older. I'm 60 this year, by the way. Right? And I started thinking as I got older that it doesn't matter how right I think I am. I need to evaluate myself and look at myself objectively and critically. And I said, then it must mean that I never conveyed to my students why what I'm requiring of them has value. The fault was not theirs. Fault was mine. That's self-evaluation. It was difficult to do. It was difficult to tell myself, you didn't do this the way it should have been done. That brought them to think this way. All right? And so when we're looking in the world of grant making, and that's my reason for sharing that illustration, is that you have to ask yourself, how is my organization functioning? Are we really capable? Are we able? Are we ready? Do we have structural obstacles that will prevent us from implementing this even if we do get the money? And I think that's the important piece, right? Do we have the staff for it? Do we have the skills necessary? And do we have the staffing that we would need to get this going? We want to also ask, have we done other programs that are similar projects? And if we haven't, what makes us think we can make a good entry into this particular space? And we're going to talk about this extensively this afternoon, because this is one of the critical elements of every proposal, and the one in which I see one of two of the greatest areas of shortcoming. That is, how will I demonstrate that what I am receiving funding to do has been successful? Evaluation. Evaluating the success of what you've done. And then, of course, the financial infrastructure to the program, right? And then there's the issue of the external readiness now. Is there data to support the need? One of the places that people fail to look that has the easiest amount of supportive data when you're writing a proposal is the U.S. Census Bureau. The U.S. Census data is what we call validated data. So here's what I mean by that. And I'm going to put on my research methods hats for a moment. So generally, if I want to find out something about a population, I would statistically find a sample, a representative sample of that population, evaluate the data around that sample, and extrapolate that this is what it means for the population. That's one type of research, right? That's quantitative or statistical research. But the census data is not a sample. It's actually the full population. That means there is never a question of validity. It is the most statistically reliable data you can use. And if your proposal that you've written to a grantor draws on census data, what you said to me is, I am giving you the most valid data there is out there in any government agency. But you want to know what's funny about it? It is also the least used in the proposals I've read. People don't do it. I don't know if it's because they don't know, or they feel maybe it's just a little bit daunting. I don't know what it is. But if you're going to do an external evaluation, reach out to the census data. If a person came to me and said, we want to set up a French language school in Bay Point, I'm going to look at them and say, in where? Why? Because the census data tells me that if they're going to do anything in a second language, it ought to be Spanish, because that's what the population is, right? The census data will point to that. Now, there may be other parts of Contra Costa County where that will make sense, right? But again, the census data will verify that. And that's that external kind of validation that we're talking about. Then you'll need to demonstrate, of course, as a part of your assessment, your feasibility study, who else is doing similar work in the area? Who else is doing it? Right? Again, being as candid as I can, Supervisor Glover and I used to talk about this a lot. Because when we're doing those Keller interviews, we would have 3, 4 organizations come in back to back in the same day, proposing the very same thing, and they don't even know each other exists. And so we got to a point where we said, okay, let's bring a microphone. I have a question over here. Let's hold on a second. And so what we started doing is we started saying to them, we will consider this if you were willing to collaborate with these other organizations. right? And I think that's an important thing to sort of keep in mind. And I don't know why my keynote keeps losing here. Well, we're back to it. If we can get one of our gentlemen to come and get the microphone so we can take a question. Another thing to look at is, are there requests for proposals that have been issued on the same subject matter, for example, recently? You need to look at that. We'll talk more about looking at foundation sources, government sources, funding, and so on and so forth. That's all part of the feasibility study. So the question is, right off the top, how do you know what you have is some at least fundable? If the funders in your area list similar programs in terms of those whom they funded, then you know at least there's an alignment with what you want to do, right? Another, of course, is that there are other grantees in your area, your geographic area, of course, that actually have received money for this type of thing. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but I want to go to some of the warning signs. If in looking at your proposal and in looking at the external funders available, that no one else has been funded for something like it, that may mean one of two things. One, your program is novel, and you will be the first. Or two, the grantors aren't interested. You've got to figure out what it is. And when you're brand new to a space, you have a lot more of an effort towards persuasion than if somebody else is already doing it, right? So keep in mind now that you are looking for alignment, right? You're looking for alignment. You're looking for external funders that want to do what you want to do. I saw a hand over here. Microphone, please. Right here.
Where would you go to get the census data? And do you get the latest current data? I mean, is it?
Yeah, so you go to census.gov. So there are two divisions of the US Census, right? There's census.gov, which is the main website that gives you the decennial census data. As you well know, the Constitution requires that a census be done every 10 years, right? Thus, it's a decennial census. So we had census data in 2000, 2010, and then we had the last census in 2020. In between the decennial census, the Census Bureau actually conducts statistical studies. It used to be called the American Fact Finder. Right? I know many of you have heard that expression before, right? Now what they do in between the decennial census is that they use statistical sampling to project what they think will happen by the next census. So let's say in 2010-20, the census count indicated X number of people with diabetes in a particular jurisdiction. They're going to use a statistical sample to project what it is now 5 years later after that was taken. But then in 2030, they will update that with actual live data. So the question is, which is more accurate? The most accurate is always going to be the general population data. But the census is good at statistics. In fact, in the past, I've invited a woman from the Oakland office of the U.S. Census Bureau to come and talk with us at this particular seminar, and perhaps we'll reach out to them again. And she talks about the fact that the Census Bureau hires some of the most masterful statisticians. At least they did up until current administration. So I can't swear as of what happened, as of the last 100 days, but you know what I mean, right? And so their statistical sampling is so good, you can count on the accuracy and the validity of the data. Right? Good. I saw another hand back there. If you can get a microphone over, please.
Juan Orantes with Choice in Aging. You mentioned alignment really briefly, and my question is, especially now with the current trends in federal funding, and even so, those dollars streaming down to different groups and foundations, I've noticed that there's a disconnect between their priorities regarding DEI, and a lot of the DEIA work is ingrained into our different organizations, and so there's a fundamental disconnect in alignment there. So how would you navigate that difference when the work a lot or most nonprofits do is rooted in diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility, when there's different priorities at the federal level, and then the dollars coming down from the federal level into different foundations?
Okay, fact number one, the majority of grant dollars coming to nonprofit corporations that are doing community-based services do not come directly, notice I said directly, from federal grants. On the other hand, the majority of public agency grants at the municipal level, that is cities and counties, comes from state and federal locations, right? Now, that said, nonprofits do get indirect dollars. For example, Community Development Block Grants. CDBG is a federal grant that is passed through on to counties and to cities for community distribution. Now, the question is, what happens when the priorities that the administration may have right now differ from the reality of what's happening on the ground, right? Particularly around diversity, equity, inclusion, access. And the answer to that is that we're still trying to figure it out. Supervisor, let's bring a microphone to the supervisor here. And, you know, she has several years of working in the federal government and certainly in Congress, so we welcome your thoughts on that.
Thank you, Armando. So we have always done it, right? We just didn't have a name for it.
Yeah.
And Supervisor Glover was the one who was talking to me about this a couple of months ago, where, you know, diversity, equity, and inclusion and access, that's something he done lived the last 24 years. So we always figure out how to bring in those different populations that need help. We just can't, if it's a federal grant, you're not gonna put those things down, you're not gonna list it, but you still are serving your population. I mean, ultimately, the work that's being done in the community come from you all.
Yes.
Because the counties and the cities do not have the funding. They do not have the manpower to be on the ground to do the work that you all do each and every day. Whether it's around youth, whether it's around seniors, financial literacy, you know, there's so much work that's being done that we don't have the manpower to do it. So that's why we allocate grants to nonprofits and community-based organizations who's on the ground, who knows what's going on, and who's doing the work. So you can still apply for those grants. You just have to keep those certain words out if it's a federal grant.
Thank you. And, you know, we can go ahead and right here, for us here in this room, plug 3 of our grant programs that are available to community-based organizations where DEI is not a bad word or a bad acronym. The Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund, the Los Medanos Healthcare Grant, and the Community Development Block Grant. We let the county officials deal with the dynamics of the federal administration and that, but at the ground level, we understand that that is still valuable, that is still needed. You know, and by the way, I just have to slip this in there. There are people like me who never had anything handed. We worked for what we achieved. Right? And so the very notion that someone would suggest to me that 5 years of doctoral research, a 130-page respected dissertation was somehow because somebody gave me a nod and a wink is idiocy. No, sir. It was work. It was work. And let me tell you, all the people of color that I know in my sphere of influence are not people who are looking for a handout. They're looking for fair play. That's it. You make no mistake about it. Yeah. So in our circle, DEI is not a bad word. And organizations like Choices in Aging, you will always continue to be central to what we need. I teach that nonprofit corporations are an extension of the public sector. We call that in public policy civil society. Right? Civil society is not a reference to behavior. It's a designation of those organizations that fill in the gap and do what public agencies just cannot do. You are civil society, and you are central to the delivery of services that we need for our communities. So please do keep that in mind. All right? Appreciate that, and thank you, Supervisor. Appreciate what you shared. Now, so because, and there are a couple questions in the back, Armando, thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kim Johnson, and I would love for you to slowly mention those 3 groups where you can use DE&I.
You mean the grant programs?
Yes.
Oh, I'll slowly mention them. The Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund. Supervisor Scales Preston is the chair of the Rank and Review Committee. And she also happens to oversee also the other grant program, which is the Los Medanos Healthcare Grant Program. Both of those are county programs that she actually oversees. And the third would be the Community Development Block Grant, which is overseen by the Department of Conservation and Development here in Contra Costa County, right? But let me tell you this, there are other grant programs that last spring, I saw some of my grad students come up with a list of grantors that I did not even know exists. Coming up with some very creative community health programs. And they were able to identify grants by doing the research, right? And one of the things, by the way, I'm planning to do next spring, and supervisor doesn't know this yet, I'm planning to offer my grad students in the healthcare administration program, since the course is required for them, to get academic credit for coming to one of our nonprofit organizations here in the county, doing the research for you and writing the proposal for you. Right? Because as far as I'm concerned, there's a whole lot more learning in that than me standing and lecturing to anybody, right? And more than that, they're becoming engaged with the community in delivering something, and I think that's deserving of academic credit. And so that's one of the things I certainly plan to do. And we're going to be looking at nonprofits who are looking to have individuals, and again, you have the benefit of me guiding them along the way as they're doing this, right? So I think that's going to be a very, very good thing. All right? Did I see another hand? Right here. Go right ahead, please.
Hi, I'm Miss Yvonne of Agape's Restore and Renew Home. It's boarding care and transitional housing for young adult females. I just wanted to know, and I struggle with the grant writing, so that's my reason to be here. I just wanted to go back to that point, but I want to know about that program you just introduced to Ms. Chanel, our supervisor over there. When does that take place?
You know, Supervisor, I'm actually surprised that so many people actually don't know. That's very surprising, which means, again, we probably didn't do a good enough job. So the Keller Canyon grant cycle, the bidders conference and so on takes place in March or April. And then funds are awarded to begin the next fiscal year, which is on July 1. We're past it for this year.
No, I was referring to the one you just mentioned.
The Los Medanos.
No, the one you said I'm going to offer to my students.
Spring. Next spring. Next year. Yes. All right. And by the way, if you're one of those nonprofits in our area of service and you are interested, reach out to us and let us know at the office. I'll keep your name on that list. Whenever I teach this course, again, it is a required course. I typically have roughly 50 graduate students at a time. Right, so we will have, I think, a good number to go around to become engaged in this with your organization. It's really quite good. Consultants who write proposals, and I'm not knocking consultants, I did it for a few years. There is a disadvantage that comes with consultants because not only do you have to pay them, but you still have to provide the staff to provide them all the data they need to write. That's one of the downsides. And so it would be good if you can do it yourself, or have someone there who at least you don't have to pay to do this. So we're going to be working on that, absolutely. And I don't know why my slides keep dropping here, but let's move on. I want to talk a bit more for this first session about the general world of philanthropy. We've kind of broached it, we've talked back and forth about it, but I want to talk a little bit more about what it involves and what a foundation is. I don't want to assume that all of you know what we mean when we use some of this language. And so I'm going to talk about what the language of grant writing actually is. When we talk about foundations, we're really talking about an organization that has been formed either as a nonprofit corporation or as a charitable trust, and I'll talk about the difference in a moment. And the main purpose is to make grants to unrelated organizations, right? Now, let me just caution you about something. Because you see the word foundation in the name of an organization, it does not mean they are a grant-making foundation. For example, there is a category of foundations that is called an operating foundation. An operating foundation is allowed under federal rules to retain for its own use up to 85% of the revenue it takes in. And you know of some operating foundations, but I'll tell you anyway. How many of you know where Los Medanos College is in Pittsburgh? Oh, well, I'm surprised. Wow. Los Medanos has a foundation called the Los Medanos College Foundation. They don't make grants. They're there to receive revenue on behalf of the college, to serve as its nonprofit charitable arm for receiving money, not giving. So don't think that because you see the name foundation, that means they're going to give you money. Similarly, my university, California State University, East Bay, has a foundation, right? They don't give out grants per se. Occasionally they do in minor amounts, but not major grants for sure. So here are some of the types of foundations. And these categories are not exclusive. They may overlap. You'll find independent foundations. Independent foundations are usually private entities that are funded by individuals or by other types of contributors. Years ago, I was working with an organization in Palo Alto. A very wealthy woman passed away and established a foundation to fund higher education for African American students in neighboring East Palo Alto, right? And the foundation was named for her, and that was their purpose. It was funded with that endowment that she left behind. Now, the different side of this is that they called me in way too late because somebody did not understand what an endowment is and how to manage it, and the money ran out. Let me just insert something here for you so you know, for those of you who are thinking about foundations and getting endowments. An endowment is meant to have the principal in perpetuity, and only revenue earned on that principal is what you give away. So let's say, for example, you receive an endowment to your organization of $100,000. The idea behind the endowment is that the investment returns you get on that $100,000 is all you have to spend. The $100,000 stays there. Well, they got happy in Palo Alto, and they were giving scholarships left and right, and they loved all the attention, and they dipped into the principal, and when it was down to $10,000, then they called me, and I said, too late. Right? That's not how it's meant to function. But then we have also community foundations that focus on local communities, regions, such as the San Francisco Foundation, the East Bay Community Foundation, etc. We talked already about operating foundations, and I've listed a few of the very popular ones. Bonus points for the person who can tell me where the name Annie Casey Foundation comes from. Anybody? I give you a hint. UPS. United Parcel Service. That's right. Annie Casey was the mother of the founder of UPS. And so when he started the foundation, he named it after his mother, Annie Casey. So we have the Annie Casey Foundation. You've heard of the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, obviously. East Bay Community Foundation, we've talked about that. Y&H Soda Foundation, we've brought them to the grant writing workshop in the past to speak, as well as we've brought the San Francisco Foundation as well. Now I want to talk about a different category of funding that my students struggle with every semester, and that many people in community-based organizations just don't know about or just don't understand. And these are corporate giving programs. Let me point out that a corporate giving program is not the same as a corporate foundation, okay? A foundation, whether it's sponsored by a corporation or not, is still a foundation. How do you know if an organization is a true foundation? Just do a quick search for their Form 990. The 990, as most of you should already know since you represent nonprofits, is the tax form that nonprofit corporations are required to file. Now, there are different types of 990s. There's a 990 EZ if you earn less than $50,000 in revenue a year. Then there's the basic 990 if you earn less than $200,000, and then it goes up from there on and on and on, right? I think they changed they keep changing the threshold over time, right? So if an organization files a 990, it is a nonprofit corporation, thus likely to be a foundation. So then what is a corporate giving program? Well, a corporate giving program is one where an organization sets aside money to give to communities, but they don't do so through a charitable foundation. they do so directly from the corporate entity. You may ask, well, what's the benefit for them? Tax benefits. Simple. Simple. Now, some of them actually will start a foundation separately and put some of the profits into that foundation. When Bill Gates was at, when Bill and Melinda Gates were Bill and Melinda Gates, and they were still at Microsoft, they took some of their profits and they put it into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, right? Fine. But Microsoft has also had programs where they give to the community directly. Apple does too. Apple has never had a foundation, but they give to schools, to school districts, to community-based organizations. They give directly. And what most nonprofits just don't realize is that these corporate giving programs are excellent sources of potential grants. They never ask. A few years ago, we pondered in District 5 Supervisor something we wanted to do for the Bay Point community. And now that it's long in the past, I can mention it. We wanted to look at getting at least entry-level computers to some of the kids in the Bay Point schools. There was a reason for it. I was in San Jose, and one of the school districts down there, Evergreen School District, wealthy as ever, they've got Silicon Valley at their disposal. So these wealthy school districts were giving their kids MacBooks at the beginning of every academic year. And I'm looking at this and thinking, well, we don't have that in Contra Costa County. We need to think about this. And so we thought Bay Point would make the perfect pilot. So Supervisor Glover agreed to it, and we reached out, of all places, to Google at the time, because the Chromebooks were a possibility that we considered. They were inexpensive, easy to maintain, didn't need a lot of technology. And Google said, hey, we'll provide it. You just have to pay for the maintenance. My point is, that corporation was willing to give because they saw the need in the community. The thing is, they don't exactly advertise their giving. You have to go looking for it, right? And part of what my students research in the spring are corporate giving programs, right? And there's several of these organizations that actually give, and I think that's an important thing. And what I've done is I've listed a couple of them right here. Corporate giving programs: Apple, Chevron, Phillips 66, West County, one of our major corporate donors in this county. They've given a lot. I know that firsthand, right? And who knows, who is State Street? Nobody's heard of State Street. You know who State Street is? One of the largest investment banks in this country. They're Massachusetts-based, but they have Bay Area offices. You don't hear about them because you're probably not exactly big in investment banking, so, you know. All right. And the funny part is I had never heard of State Street either. I was working for the city of Oakland as chief development officer, and we were looking for a way to fund this program called Safe Passages Home. And most foundations just don't want to give to public entities. And so we're looking at this, and I'm trying to figure out, how the heck do I do this? And then I was in Walgreens, near where I lived in San Leandro one day, and there was a woman there with a young child that was screaming his head off, and he was doing what kids do when they're toddlers, rolling on the floor, screaming, and mommy's as frustrated as ever. And she's looking at me because he's toppling and kicking me a couple times, and she's looking at me saying, I am so sorry. I said, been there, done that. You don't ever have to apologize for me for your child being a child. That's quite fine. And I said, what do you do? She says, my name is Kim, and I am a regional vice president at State Street. I said, State who? State Street. And she proceeded to educate me on what State Street does. And then she said, you know what we do for the community that people don't know of? She says, I have the discretion to grant up to $10,000 without corporate approval to community-based organizations. And I promptly connected her with several community-based organizations that I knew, and they got the money. There was no complex proposal writing process. It's just a matter of knowing the right person. And she said if they want larger grants, they can go through corporate and get up to $100,000. But nobody knows about them. because corporate giving programs haven't always been announcing what they do. But you must keep in mind that they are a legitimate source as well. And I hope that you're going to take that, if nothing else, from what we're talking about today. These corporate giving programs. I think that Wells Fargo, by the way, has one. And I didn't even know Wells Fargo had a corporate giving program until there was a time when Wells Fargo, do they still have that branch in Pittsburgh? Yeah, Wells Fargo. And I only knew about their corporate giving program because one of their vice presidents was one of my grad students, Tim. And I said to him, so what does Wells Fargo do for the community? He had come from a business background and he's coming in out of the public administration. He said, oh, we have this. And one of the first things I did is pointed Tim to one of our community-based organizations right here in Contra Costa County, Opportunity Junction. He joined their board of directors as I recommended it, and brought them tons of dollars. We have a question. Microphones right here. Let's take the back first and then come forward. Thank you.
Me again. Quick question. Do you ever see the startup companies, the tech startup companies also doing corporate donorship?
They do. A lot of the startups, though, they are interested in more of the venture capital world, right, initially. Later on, as they get more established, then they're likely to look at partnerships. And by the way, the thing with corporate donors is that I've realized over time, they're not just interested in giving money. If you really want to engage a corporate donor, give them something to do visibly in the community. For example, one of the things I did with State Street is that there were a bunch of transitional housing programs in Oakland for individuals who were formerly incarcerated. And these places were operated by Volunteers of America, and I had ties to Volunteers of America at the time, and these buildings needed work. Do you know what excited them? These accountants wanted the opportunity to leave their offices and come paint the building. Literally. They relished the chance to leave their offices, come paint the building. All of a sudden they felt these were their buildings. So now they're willing to put their hands and their wallets into these buildings. So if you want to engage them, go beyond just simply asking them for money. Ask them to come and be a part of what you are doing. Right? Thank you. Come on down. There are a couple of hands right here, here, and here.
Thank you. Just quickly back to the banking.
Yes.
I have been involved with other nonprofits, and there's lots of community banks that are willing
Yes.
to provide the $10,000 without too much. Do you need to put money in every single one, like Wells Fargo? So when you're on a limited, small budget, do you believe in sharing the wealth, or how would you proceed with that?
I'm not sure I understand. What do you mean?
If they're saying, like, if F&M Bank is saying, we'll give you 10,000, and Wells Fargo is saying, we'll give you 10,000, and so, do you need to diversify the funds that you have?
So here's a little secret. Here's a little secret I can tell you from reviewing lots of proposals over the years. We tend to favor projects where others see value in funding that project too. Every nonprofit executive director knows that funding is always a hodgepodge. There are very few nonprofits that function on singular or two sources. It's usually a matter of pulling from multiple sources to be able to get it done. And when a grantor looks, one of the things we ask in the Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund, one of the reasons we ask you for a sources and uses budget, which is a specific budget type we'll talk about this afternoon, is so we can know who else is funding you. If you have no other funder but us, we go, well, we'll think about it, right? Especially if you're brand new. But if we look and we say, oh, well, they do get that money, it must mean that they've demonstrated that they're a good, feasible, workable program. We'll join. It's not fair. I get it. Because you may be the one that need it and you don't have anybody else funding you, but it's just the reality of the human interaction. I saw another hand over here somewhere, right here.
question regarding, like, what happened with the Facebook Foundation? Can you explain that? How they-
Not sure.
I saw
Not sure.
something
But I
where-
do know Zuckerberg has his own foundation, him and his wife Priscilla Chen, but their foundation focuses largely on the healthcare sector because she's a physician, I believe. So I don't know what they're doing with more regular community-based organizations. I think if I remember correctly, looking at what one of my students researched about a year back, is that Facebook is still giving, though, as a corporate donor. But the foundation that they formed is now pretty much medical. They have a whole wing at UC San Francisco. The Chan Zuckerberg division over there, yeah. So they've put a lot of their money into the medical kind of field. Yeah, but don't write them off just yet. Don't write them off yet. In the back? And that'll be our last comment. I need to move on before we get to our break, coming up in about half an hour. Yes?
I have a question about specifically Phillips 66, which I'm certain it's probably not unique to them. The research I did show that they do not accept randos, for lack of a better term. You need to have some type of ongoing relationship with them. How do you work around those foundations that is making it known that they typically maybe only work with the same organizations time after time?
Yeah, what happens is that those become trusted entities for managing funds. I've worked with Phillips 66 for years, many, many years. I know Amy and I know some of their executives over there, and they have invested heavily in the West County. Deborah, you know this, right? They have invested in the community over there, and then they have a new renewables type of program that they're doing now. What has happened with a lot of the corporate donors is because managing a bunch of small grants became a bit tedious for them. So what some of these grantors, these corporations want to do is to find a trusted community-based organization as their distributor, more or less, right? The problem is then accessibility. Who gets access to it, right? I will talk about some strategies later for building a relationship with those organizations that can help you to bypass some of those obstacles, though. All right, good, thank you. Did I see a hand, a comment? Please go ahead, Supervisor. We're getting to get a microphone. I thought we had two of those. No?
Here. This one.
There's another microphone over there.
Thank you, Armando. I just want to add to the list, just because we here at Ambrose Center, is Marathon. So when you go out to the parking lot, those basketball courts, Marathon, a corporate donor, donated to repave the basketball courts and put new courts out there last month here at the Ambrose Centers for the Youth.
Thank you.
Yeah, so you can add that to your list. And then also they provided shower trailers, a shower trailer to the Bay Church back in August. And the Bay Church provides the shower program here in Pittsburgh every Saturday. So if your program or nonprofit is looking to do different things, Marathon is another one that's trying to give back to the community. I know Republic Services, also they have the Keller Landfill here in Bay Point. They are looking to give back to the community as well. So those are two more you can add to your list. And then FUM Martinez, MRC is also looking to do more community work within the city of Martinez.
And we are really beginning to tell them that if you're going to come into one of these communities and essentially extract profits by the very existence of your business, it is reasonable, it is moral, and it is ethical that you put something back into these communities. And I believe public agencies have to do a better job of holding corporations, to providing back into the communities that they're coming to. And the supervisor is constantly speaking with our economic development people and so on about corporations that want to come to Contra Costa County. And one of the questions we always ask is, yeah, okay, we get it. They want to build that building here. They want to have employees that may or may not come from Contra Costa County. And then what? What happens to the community around? What do they leave behind in terms of other than their corporate footprint? And I think that's an important piece. And by the way, just to give you an idea, this part is really so important that I put it at first. When we come back at 10:15 after our break, we dive into the actual elements of a proposal. So Please don't think we're sort of slow in getting to that, but I've known over time that this piece is important for you to understand before you think about writing. I've included a couple slides here on some of the factors that influence the availability of grant money. Whenever the economy is slow, the donor base is a little slower for the foundations, and they give less as well, right? So it's an interesting dynamic. You know, economic factors play into it. Current events often play into it. And I want to just show you a couple more, if I can, on this. But I want to say that one of the things that we need to focus on a lot is, again, on building relationships. We need to focus on building relationships. And if you see me walking over here, it's because I keep losing my web connection. So that's what's happening, why you see me walking over there. I don't ever like to look back behind me at slides when I'm talking. I want to see your beady eyes looking and saying, yeah, what is he going to say next? Yeah. Right? So let me talk a bit about building relationships and what's involved with that. And I always include this because it's important. If you have heard about a potential grant from a friend, you don't know the grantor, they don't know you, and you're just going to apply, clear out of the blue to them, the chances of getting the money is about 10%, no more. What this illustrates is the value that comes with having a relationship. So how do you build a relationship with grantors? Well, let's look at it. Number one, every grantor at some point has what is called a bidders conference, or a grant meeting that essentially talks about the requirements for a proposal. Attend those that are provided by grantors, even when you're not applying. That way, the program officers get acquainted with who you are. I learned that strategy years ago when I was vice president at Volunteers of America. Now, Volunteers of America is a large national nonprofit, and the proposals that I wrote at Volunteers of America were an average of $5 million at a time, $6 million at a time to run programs. And Volunteers of America developed a reputation of winning almost every competitive grant to run community corrections program. And they wondered, how did you guys do it? Because we didn't have a grant writer per se, right? I pulled my staff together and wrote it, even though I was the vice president. You know what I did? I would go to the Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation in Sacramento, meet every single officer that I wanted to get acquainted with, say, I'm just here to introduce myself, this is who I am, this is what I do. Nope, not applying for anything, just wanted to get to know you, appreciate the work you're doing. And I remember the first time we were going to apply, I showed up to one of the bidders conferences, and one of the senior officers in the back said, I see David Fraser from Volunteers of America is here. Are you applying? I said, absolutely. And we got it. $5 million to run a transitional case management program. The lesson I learned from that was that when they know you, and I'm going to tell you something else that happened. There was an organization in Southern California that stole one of our proposals and submitted it to the CDCR. We get a call at the office. There's an organization that submitted a proposal that looks remarkably like what you have written. We wanted to check with you. Relationships. And by the way, this company was in Ventura, in Southern California. They've actually siphoned it off a website. Right? Oh yeah, oh yeah. Here's the other thing. Invite executives from grantors to serve on your nonprofit boards and commissions. Right? When you have nonprofit organizations, you remember Washington Mutual that Chase gobbled up? There's a small organization in East Oakland. I used to help write their proposals. And I remember I said to them, you guys are doing great services here in East Oakland. You cover primarily the Fruitvale District and Points North. You need some banking executives on your board. And so they listened and they reached out to Washington Mutual. And a lot of these executives, they have some obligation corporately to serve on these boards. And they came on board and they never did not get a Washington Mutual grant. It's really that simple. If you are operating in a silo and not reaching out to get these executives from the banking sector and the other parts involved, then you're making it more difficult for yourself. Here's something else to help build relationships. The early projects that you're going to do if you're a brand new nonprofit, do it in partnership with an established nonprofit. Do it in partnership with someone. Now, I know everybody wants to be the star. I know you want your program to shine. You want to be able to say, I am the executive director and I made this amazing thing happen. Look at me. And in reality, the grantor is looking at you saying, and who are you? Until they get acquainted. Microphone, please, to the front and while they're coming. So you want to take an opportunity to build partnerships. Right over here, Armando. Build those partnerships, right? And I think that's important. Another is that you should, from time to time, I'll take your question in a moment, from time to time, if you're a community-based organization, hold an open house and invite potential grantors to attend. Come see what you're doing. Don't ask them for money. Just say, I want you to see what we're doing. There's nothing that works better than people seeing what you do. There's a woman, I don't even remember who she is now, here in East County. I remember one time she came to our office saying, I'm looking for some money, and I'm thinking, oh, everybody is. And then she disappeared for a while. Then I got this request, would you like to come and see what we do for our senior programs? And I spent a morning driving around Antioch with her at various senior housing programs, and I got a sense as to what she was doing. And after that, I'm like, yeah, this is worthwhile. This is worthwhile. It makes a difference. So you want to reach out and get people to come and see what you're doing. And here's something else. It's a simple one. Have your organization provide a periodic human service award. This is good. Let's say, for example, and I'm going to talk about a nonprofit that I'm acquainted with, right? The East County NAACP. The president is sitting over here, Dr. Payton. Wave your hand so people can see who you are. That's the president of the East County NAACP, Dr. Kimberly Payton. So let's suppose I'm the East County NAACP, and one of the things I can do to help build this credibility is offer maybe an annual human service award and give that award to a good corporate source that is engaged in the community. Because I'm going to tell you this, when that executive gets that award that they put in their office that says, in NAACP Corporate Friend of the Year, when you come knocking for money, they're suddenly a whole lot more interested because they have ties to you. It may seem like a simple thing, but trust me, I've had people who have tried this and it works. And then the last one on this slide before we take that question, when you do ask the first time, don't ask for the maximum. So for community-based organizations, the Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund has a cap of $10,000. For community-based organizations, it's different for public agencies. And we've had organizations that come up we've never heard of the organizers, never heard of the company officials, we've never heard of them, and they ask right out the blue, we want $10,000. And, you know, we would look at it and say, well, okay, good luck getting it. Right? On the other hand, there are times when we see that the program is very, very good, and we would come back and say, we can't give you 10 because we don't know you. What would you do with 5? Right? Now, occasionally, there are people who have said to us, well, it's hard to run the program on 5. All right, then don't run the program. There are smarter people who know how to establish scalability and say, all right, if you can give us 5, here's what we can do instead of what we propose. So you start small and you build credibility, and over time you're able to advance. Yes, the question.
So I was interested when you said that there are grantors who have periodic conferences and regional activities.
Yes, they do.
What is the most cost-efficient, time-efficient way to track that?
For example, and I don't have this in the slide, the Northern California Grant Makers Association. That's perhaps the largest one regionally for Northern California. And there's a Southern California one too, because most of the major grantors are a part of that corporation. Their offices are based in Oakland, by the way. Northern California Grant Makers Association. Find them on the web, and they will link you to just about every major collaborative of grant-making conferences and so forth. Get acquainted with them, stay connected to them. All right? Yes, there's one question also in the back.
Good morning. My name is Victoria Wimberly. I'm the founder of First Page New Chapter Tutoring, and I know exactly the relationships that are necessary in order to make success for our tutoring business here in East Contra Costa County. The thing that I'm up against and the challenge, there's a number of individuals that I'm already in partnership with here.
Yeah.
And because I have relationships with approximately 40 organizations, I'm trying to find organizations within East Contra Costa County that I can collaborate
Yeah.
with. There is no data. I do due
Yeah.
diligence in research and finding out all the specific numbers that I need and what's going on based upon what the needs are in East Contra Costa County.
Yeah.
So that would be my major question. How do we get, hypothetically, the listing of organizations so that we can partner, because our organization has partnered with numerous organizations, and the way that we get out, because the data that you're providing, we're not really familiar with for the past 8 years.
Yeah.
But we are truly engaged in the community a lot. I would like to know how we could do that in order to be successful and bring a lot more resources and tools to East Contra Costa County.
Love the question. Very valid question. Two sources. If you can reach out to our office, and I have business cards here on the table, and there's contact in the back. We can connect you with Simon Billette, who actually heads an East County collaborative of nonprofits. But more than that, we have a very large database of those nonprofits because they apply for funding via our office. Right? And so what we encourage people to do is that, and by the way, that information is public information. The name of the applying organizations is public information. So we can give you a general idea listing of nonprofits that we have funded in East Contra Costa County easily. You just got to reach out to our office and do it. And I appreciate that you asked that question because we've heard that issue before, right? And so here's what's happening. In many cases, what has happened is that some organizations tend to be very parochial in their approach. They see each other strictly as competitors. So they don't want to share information. They feel that you are competing in their space. And in some ways, maybe we, the county and other funding sources have contributed to that problem by giving priority to perhaps organizations. And by the way, I'm echoing something Supervisor Scales-Preston mentioned to me on a couple of occasions that is a point of concern for her, that we are probably granting money to the well-oiled machines that are bigger and they know how to pay for the right type of proposal writer. And we do need to come up with a better strategy that to level the playing field for smaller nonprofits. I know that's something she did raise to me. All right. And so that is something that we are really going to begin to look at. And also, we're thinking of broadening the scope of eligible organizations. Case in point, the Keller Canyon Mitigation Fund has for many years funded only public agencies or 501c3 corporations. Now, the Internal Revenue Code has roughly 40 subsections under 501 Section C. Right? You have C1s, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 28, 29, 30s. Right? But the one that most people know of are 501c3s, which is your standard charitable organization. Well, chambers of commerce are also nonprofits. They are C6s. And then there's another category that we just began to realize that we need to pay attention to, and those are fraternal organizations that are C8s. And one of the things I talked with the supervisor about is going back and asking the board to authorize adding that category as well to those who are eligible for funding. We want to broaden the number of individuals, the number of organizations, and the types of organizations that can be eligible for funding and the partnerships you mentioned. In the back.
Hi, good morning. My name is Mari Benavides. I work for La Concordia Wellness Center as a grant writer. You were talking about asking questions at the bidders conference. Sometimes for big organizations, they don't allow you on the Zoom calls to like really, make your voice heard sometimes.
Yeah.
They just have a Q&A. How would you go about that so that you can try to get in touch with the people who are in charge of the grant?
Find out who the program officer is and reach out directly via email. Every grantor wants to make sure that you address the questions before you write the proposal. So find out who the program officer is for that particular grant program. Shoot them an email, right? Now, you may not find you won't find their phone number on the website because they don't want 100 people calling them, but you're likely to find their emails, right? I can tell you once we make our Keller Canyon grant announcement, our staff feels tons of emails with follow-up questions and inquiry. We want to answer those. We want to make sure that you are clear. And I think every program officer wants that as well. Yes, we have a couple more in the back, and then we'll move on.
First of all, thank you so much for hosting this. I'm curious if you're familiar with deliberative democracy, and within that context, if you have any experience around deliberative philanthropy, around creating, citizen assembly or citizen spaces where, just like the lady over there mentioned, that we all share what we're doing, the different projects we're doing, and especially around like the different areas, because I know there's grants going out to different, basically little mini bioregions, right? So like just gathering people into that space, asking what project people are doing, maybe letting the people collaborate, and then actually guaranteeing the money at the end of that. That's a deliberative philanthropy. Like at the end of that, everybody gets the money. None of it gets like, but also everybody in the community identifies, oh, hey, we can collaborate. I have this skill, you have that skill. All right, we'll work on that. Right now, everybody's kind of siloed off. I wonder, there's a bunch of questions, but I'm also asking this question in relation to the crisis we're in. We're kind of in an economic, socio-political, socio-economic, environmental crisis. So being able to collaborate in a way we actually create actions right away would be super beneficial to all of us, so we can build some resilience locally.
Yeah, I think this is akin to what you asked the District 3 supervisor, the other day supervisor, about a potential grant program where every nonprofit that participates gets some money at the end of the time. So it's not something that's lost to us. As I mentioned, District 5 has the benefit of having a supervisor who understands the grant-making world tremendously from the federal level. And so the things you're talking about, it's already in her purview, and she's looking at it and exploring those options. Absolutely. One more, and then we'll move on right over here. I think it was Yvette.
Okay, so I want to talk about collaborating. So one of my agencies is Back on Track Expungement Services. On occasion, I'll get a phone call from someone who started doing business with the Clean Slate program. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell them, you know what, I imagine they're gonna do a great job by you. I do not step on their feet. However, these same people will refer other people to me who have not started with them. When I do my community engagement events, I started doing those in 2010. That was the public defender's office was the first place that I called, because I want them, when they see me, hey, and hey, back and forth. You guys, don't be afraid to collaborate with someone that's doing the same thing as you, because eventually it'll come back to you also. That's all I want to say.
I can tell you when Yvette started this many years ago, because we've been collaborating for a good number of years. You better make sure, she made sure we knew who she was and what she was doing. Anytime we had the door open, she was there. So we knew, and after a while, her name became a household word for us, right? And that's precisely what you want to do. Let me just move on quickly before we get to our break. I want to talk about one other aspect of this. Now, you have way more slides that I'm covering, but I don't like to just read slides, if you don't mind, so I may skip a few of them, but you do have them available to you. When it comes to who initiates the grant, there are two perspectives, right? There's one that we call the grant seeker initiator. That's you. Your nonprofit, your public agency, your department. You want to find money to do something. And then there's the grant maker initiative. And by the way, a grant maker is the grantor agency. That's just the language of the grant making world, right? They initiate it. In other words, they release a request for proposals or a request for concept papers or a request for qualifications or one of those myriads of requests or a notice of funding availability or of a super NOFA, and the list goes on, right? So here's the reality. When you have a case where you are the one initiating it, right? And my slide didn't change, right? Well, it should have. No, it didn't change up there. That's kind of weird. I'm seeing it on my screen change, but not on there. Okay, let's try this again. Yep. Okay. Technology. So, if you are the grant seeker and you're initiating, in other words, you're writing a proposal and reaching out, right? Because you have a need that needs to be met. Be clear about something. you are less likely to receive the money than if it's something the grant maker initiated. There's a reason why. Because as much as you may have the need, you don't know if they have the resources to do it, right? If they initiate it, on the other hand, right, where they are the grant maker, did it change? Yeah, right? Then they're saying to you, we have the money, we want to get somebody to do this. And so there's a likelihood that you can get it. And so I've done here a comparison slide, which I think is very important. When you're identifying a good prospective funder, these two things must exist. And if one or the other is missing, your chance of getting the money is zero. Zero. Both of these must exist in order for you to get the grant money. One, the funder must be capable, right, of funding what you're asking, right, financially or otherwise. And you can't assume that they're capable of doing it. You need to be sure that they're capable of doing it. And then number two, they must be inclined to do it. In other words, they see value in what you're doing and they're willing to do it. So there's some grantors that may have the capability, but they just don't want to fund your program. So you don't get the money. There's some who may look at your program and say, man, this is amazing. This is excellent. We'd love to fund this, but our grant cycle is closed until next fiscal year. You don't get the money. So what you're looking for is a grantor that has the willingness or the inclination and the capability at the same time to fund you. And that is not easily done. I mentioned earlier that one of the things that when people are doing research about grant or agencies that they overlook the most, that they should not, is the 990. See, 990s are public documents. Download the 990 from your particular organization and you will get a clear idea as to where they got their money from and how they distributed the money as well. It'll tell you a lot. Can they be long? Yeah, a large nonprofit can have a 990 that's 150 pages and you're thinking, I don't want to read through that. Well, let me ask you this. Is reading through that 150 pages worth of document worthwhile understanding what it takes to get $100,000 of their money? Maybe it is. Maybe it is. So you have to establish what the priority is, and that's very, 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 very important, right? Let me just do a couple more things, and then I'm going to move away from these. We won't talk a lot about the foundations, but when we come back, we're going to begin by talking about the language of grant writing, and then we'll talk about the actual proposal. In Contra Costa County, before we take our break, and then we'll come back at 10:15. In Contra Costa County, years ago, the Board of Supervisors passed a sort of a informal order saying whenever you come to the board and you're going to give a report, you cannot use acronyms unless you explain what they mean. In public agencies, all of us like to look and sound intelligent, so we like to throw around these acronyms that nobody understands. We were considering all the NOFAs and all the ACRAs and the ECRAs and EFSAs and people are looking and saying, what the heck are they talking about? But we feel nice about ourselves because it shows we're educated people. There is a language that is used, and the young woman in the back said she's a grant writer for one of the organizations. You know, there's the language of the grant writing world that if you're not in it, you just don't know. And it can be very, very daunting. When we get back, we're going to talk about what that language looks like. I'm going to give you some of the key words to look for, to understand. They're in your slides. And then we'll spend the rest of our time talking about the actual writing of a proposal. What should be in it, right? What should be in it? Now, this afternoon, we're also going to ask you after lunch, I'm going to put you in some small groups to sort of work together to begin to explore some potential ideas that you can take from here. Because, you know, it doesn't make sense me lecturing at you all day if you don't get a chance to try this out and bounce off ideas off each other. The other thing is that when we take our lunch break, which is going to be at 12:15, right? I'm sticking around. I'm going to snack and give you a chance then to come and ask me questions that you maybe were too shy to ask here. And I can go around to your tables as you're having your lunch, which we're providing, and address questions or ideas or anything like that that you have. One word of caution. My professional schedule is ridiculously busy. So I will tell you right up front, no, you can't send me the RFP and tell me write the proposal for you. Not gonna happen. right? We have one of the most working county supervisors. If you haven't look at her newsletter to see what her schedule is like, you don't understand what I mean. So we don't have time, I'm afraid, to write proposals. We're busy trying to keep up with her, right? So, but by all means, if you have questions and you're writing something, you said, I want to run an idea by you. Can you help me figure out this for a few minutes? We'll be glad to, right? That's part of what we want to offer as a service. So I think the water is here now. Enjoy your break. There's still some breakfast items. The lunch is supposed to be here by 11:30. See you back at 10:15.